Hi, and welcome back to the Positive Prepper. So, when I do these videos, I try really hard not to scare anyone or use the, oh my gosh, it's happening now mentality. What I try to do is help you be as prepared as you can, okay, for whatever events may happen, whether it's a full-blown war or a natural disaster, right? I sometimes find myself sugarcoating things because we are already completely inundated with bad news and reports of constant conflict or global circumstances. And the last thing I want to do is add to any of that. But that being said, we do need to be real about everything going on. And I firmly stand by my statement that between now and November, and probably even beyond that, things could get really scary. Now I know that many people, including myself, after the election of 2020, thought that more was going to happen. Thankfully, we just had the rioting and the city's burning, right? But even back then, if you think about it, people were still reeling from the consequences of a disease that was unleashed on the world, and they were trying to cope with their lost jobs, working from home, children doing online learning, and the fear of, who was going to get that disease next. That was the focus of most Americans back then. Our focus now should be on a lot more things that could escalate into real conflict with real consequences. But think about what the media is keeping us focused on right now. Trump's legal issues, how great Biden is, abortion, and people who identify as something they truly aren't. The southern border, except for a few news sources, hasn't been important. And it won't be unless it's another photo op for the current administration. We don't hear much anymore about the proxy war between Ukraine and Russia. And the only news that we really hear about between Israel and Hamas is the anti-Israel protesters who, in my opinion, are getting a lot of unnecessary coverage. So we are waiting for the media to tell us what is important. What you need to keep in mind is when the bough breaks, the cradle will fall. We are living in a cradle, and at some point that will fall probably into a burning forest, and it will be much more impactful than anyone believes it will be. So where will your cradle drop, and how hard will your landing be? And that, of course, depends on how prepared you are. Many in the prepping community will give you their perspective on the source of the SHTF that they think will happen. But you need to be prepared on your own worst case scenario. People living in a city will be differently impacted than people living in the country or rural communities. And as much as I hate to say this, even your race and or religion might create a different impact. In the book of Matthew, chapter 24, verses 42 through 44, Jesus said, and I quote, "Therefore keep watch, because you do not know what day your Lord will come. And understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come in an hour when you don't expect him." Now, in these verses, he is talking about his own coming, but it can be applied to prepping as well. We don't know when anything will happen. If we knew, and I wish we did, when the exact date, time, and circumstance would be. It would be a lot easier to prepare for, right? But we don't have that luxury. We can only prepare for what we believe is going to happen. And there's a multitude of directions that it could come from the way things are today. So whatever you have prepared already, continue with those preps. Don't forget the spiritual and emotional preps as well, like I've talked about in my last couple of videos. In my humble opinion, what is going on in the world is more about good versus evil than it is about this group of people against that group of people. Remember that you cannot put an equation on the strength of darkness, but you can on light. Evil is the presence of Satan, but it is also the absence of God, right? Just like darkness is the absence of light. The more this world shuns his teachings through Jesus, the more absent God will be. So be ready for that cradle to rock at any time. Be ready for how hard you want that cradle to hit the ground, and be ready to face whatever it is you will face, right? When you no longer have that safety net or that cradle underneath you. So that's a message that I wanted to put out today, is that, you know, and I don't want to use the word complacency again, because I use that quite frequently. But it is one of my biggest concerns, is that too many people think that either it's not going to happen or it's not going to be as bad as we think. So I wanted to use the analogy of the cradle, right? And the bough breaks, the wind blows, the bough breaks, cradle comes crashing down. It will be up to you and you alone. You cannot rely on the government. You cannot rely on your community. You got to remember that your community is made up of people who probably feel just like you do, and they're going to be trying to protect their own. So you have to be able to rely on yourself. So how hard that cradle hits the ground and what you do after is completely dependent upon how prepared you are. So my next video is going to be about the movie Oppenheimer. My next video was inspired by the movie Oppenheimer. If you haven't seen it, I highly, highly recommend it. There was a lot to learn in that movie from a historical perspective. But then after a lot of digging that we did in sort of the outside goings on of that movie, there are so many more deep state fingerprints on not just that part of our history, but also throughout our government sense. And so I want to do a video on that, and it might be, I'm going to try to keep that one short. I can't guarantee that, because there is a lot that if you don't know your history, you might not understand the tentacles that are pretty much in everything that impact our daily lives. So that will be on my next video. That will come out in the next day or two. Please continue to hit that like button. We are reaching so many more people who need to hear these messages. And so I appreciate all of you that are doing that. And also don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. So as always, stay safe, stay aware, and God bless.